Hello, this is Thomas, K4SWL. If you're new here, I like to do real-time, real-life amateur radio field activation videos, but today I'm doing something a little different. I am going to take a look at these two fine radios, the Xiegu X5105 and the Elecraft KX2. I've gotten a lot of questions lately from people who want to buy one or the other, and they can't make a purchase decision very easily. And so I thought maybe I'd talk through these radios and talk about the pluses and minuses of each, what they have in common, what they don't have in common, that sort of thing. This isn't going to be, a comprehensive comparison review or anything like that. I am out here. I just finished up with a field activation. I brought these two radios along, and I thought maybe I'd just kind of show very quickly the things I like and maybe don't like about each one, to help you guide your decision, because frankly, everything about picking a radio has everything to do with how you like to operate the radio and the operating style. If you're looking for a really compact, distilled, well-edited video, this is not going to be that video. You can look elsewhere on the internet or YouTube for that. This is going to be kind of some loose thoughts about these radios. So, first of all, I should say there's a very obvious difference between these two radios. The Xiegu X5105 costs about $550 to $600 US, depending on the time of year, if there are any sales, that sort of thing. You may be able to find them a little cheaper. Certainly can find them used. Whereas the Elecraft KX2 is, when configured the same way with the same accessories, roughly about $1,200 to $1,300 US. So you could buy two X5105s for one KX2, which is, I think, one of the reasons why people really want to know what I think about the radios before they make a purchase decision, because this one's a bit more of a commitment. But I know a lot of people who have told me, hey, I'm willing to pay this if you think it's worth it. And so let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, I should say, there's going to be an obvious difference when you've got a price discrepancy this large. But I kind of consider it a bit like, I was just thinking of the analogy of power pole crimpers. Back when I first started adding power pole connectors onto my power cords and standardizing on it in my shack, the crimpers that I really wanted, which were ratcheting crimpers, were like, I think, $40 for a pair of crimpers. I tend to go for high quality tools when I can buy them. But at the time, I thought, how many crimps am I going to make? Like 4? That's all I had that I was planning to make. And I looked around the internet and found that Harbor Freight Tools, which is a discount sort of hardware store here in the United States, they had a crimper that had been used for power poles. It wasn't designed for that, but it worked really well for them. And it was like $7. It didn't make as good a crimps or as reliable of crimps as the ratcheting one, but the cost difference was gigantic, for me, who was only planning to make 4 crimps. And I use that crimper. I still use that crimper today, even though now I have a professional crimper, which I love. In a way, there's a little bit of a comparison here that you'll see. The X5105 is almost like the Harbor Freight crimpers, whereas the KX2 is more like, a high-end, crimper in that analogy. But the two things that these radios, the thing that these two radios share in common, and the reason why they're compared, is they're what I would call a shack-in-a-box design. Meaning the radio it's completely self-contained. Like, I can turn these on right now, both of these radios, and they power up, even though they're not connected to a power supply, because they both have internal batteries. For the KX2, it's an option. For the X5105, it's just built in. And let me turn this down. And in fact, that's one of the differences in philosophies here. You can buy the KX2 base unit for much less, because Elecraft kind of comes out of a sort of a market of making kits. And so their kits are modular, and meaning that you can add what you want to have in your radio, or when you want to. So the KX2 comes as a base unit, which is the transceiver. You can buy the internal battery and the external battery charger separately. A microphone, this is separate. You can buy this. The internal antenna tuner is a separate thing that you can buy and have added. And once you've added all these things, which is basically what comes with the X5105, it comes with an internal battery that can actually be internally charged. It comes with a really good internal ATU. It comes with the microphone, this microphone, and power cords and all that stuff. It comes with that, whereas with the KX2 you buy them all kind of piecemeal and put them together, and that's where the price difference comes. It's about $1,200, I think $60 last time I priced it out for the KX2, when you have all those things plus a microphone if you buy it. Whereas the X5105, you're only paying that $550 to $600 for the radio and all those accessories. But being a shack in a box means that you can actually, this is the entire shack here. You know, you got your power supply, your antenna tuner, your radio. You've got everything you need to operate. Both of these radios have a built-in microphone as well. So you can operate single sideband off of the built-in microphone. I think this is the microphone here on the X5105, and the one on the KX2 is over here. So both of these I have operated without a microphone, which is great for summits on the air because you don't need to carry something separate with you in order to do the activation with voice modes. Both of these radios are general coverage, meaning you can listen to things outside of the ham radio bands, like shortwave radio broadcast, AM broadcast, that sort of thing. And that's something I really love in modern radios because I'm a shortwave radio listener as well. So I love the ability to tune around and do that. Both of these units have built-in speakers. On the X5105, it's mounted on the top. On the KX2, it's on the bottom. Both of them have fold-out legs so that it props it up at an angle. You can see these here. Both of these are lightweight radios. The KX2 is slightly lighter weight than the X5105, but they're both lightweight. I mean, you could carry those in a pack and never really know they're there. Both of these radios have built-in CW memory messaging, so that, for example, if you're in the field and you want to call CQ, you can pre-program your CQ message so that all you have to do is press a button in order to send your CQ message from the message memory. That's a really nice thing. I think both of these radios are relatively rugged. I hear people talk about the KX2 all the time saying, it doesn't feel very rugged. Well, I can tell you now, I dropped this radio on the ground the other day, and only evidence I can see from that is just a little bit of chipping here at the top of this acrylic screen protector, which I can replace if I want to. I mean, that's the great thing about Elecraft gear, is it's very easy to find replacement parts. The X5105, all of the controls are kind of flat, and so there's not a lot to really get hurt if it falls, and it's got a really nice, really thick screen protector on it as well, on the model I have. Some of the early models don't have that, I don't think. If you're wanting a weatherproof radio, go for the Discovery TX500. Neither one of these radios are weatherproof at all. If it rains on them, rain can get in here. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit, let's focus on the X5105 here for a second, and talk about some of the pros and maybe some of the advantages it has over the KX2. For one thing, a really obvious one, is this is a 160 meter to 6 meter radio. So I can go all the way down to 160 meters and all the way up to 6 meters if I want to. That's pretty impressive for a portable radio like this. Very impressive, in fact. And that's a really great feature. The KX2 only has 80 meters to 10 meters for the ham bands that you can use. Another obvious thing, as I mentioned before, is the price is less than half of the KX2. And I would say that that's an advantage, of course, because these are more accessible because of that. You don't have to invest as much money to get one of these radios. Another thing, which is a really nice feature of the X5105, is you can charge the battery internally. So there's an internal lithium-ion battery in here that you can charge internally. The negative is, to replace that battery, you would have to break the seal. So if your radio is still under warranty and you break the seal, then you could void the warranty doing that. It's not meant to be user replaced, but it certainly can be user replaced. I know people who've done that. but you'll avoid the warranty doing it. They really want you to send it into a service center or something to have that done, I guess. Those are pretty much what I consider the advantages of the X5105. I may think of something else. Other than the fact, you know, the package you get with it is nice. Like, this is the microphone that comes with the X5105. This is the one that usually comes with the KX2 that you buy separately. This just has up and down buttons and a PTT switch. This one has, like, pretty much for full rig control from this. It's like a mobile radio you know, style handset. So very, very nice. And with backlit keys, that's another thing that the X5105 has, is backlit keys. That's not something that the KX2 has. And you can change the backlighting by pressing this little red button that changes it. Now, oddly, the keys are only backlit on the front, the main face. They are not on top for some reason. They didn't bother doing that there, but that's okay. You know where those buttons are. There are only 5 on the top. So yeah, that's one thing. Now, let's talk a little bit about the KX2. Now, this radio has some of the advantages of it are, number one, the X5105, the maximum output power, no matter how you have it configured, is 5 watts. With the KX2, even with the internal battery, you can operate 10 watts output power in CW, SSB, or digital modes. When the battery voltage from the internal battery drops to a certain level, then it'll back off to about 5 watts. But I get a really long playtime out of that. Back when I did National Parks on the Air, when I first bought the KX2, I could operate for about 1 hour, 15 minutes at 10 watts single sideband before it would start to go down in power to 5 watts. And then you could operate for probably 2 or more hours after that. I have never completely run down the battery in the KX2 before. I've been able to operate and operate and operate off of it. Multiple activations, and now that I'm doing CW a lot more often, you know, I only use 5 watts with this. I never even turn it up to 10 watts, or at least very, very rarely. The KX2 is smaller than the X5105. You know, you can look at it here from the side, and you can see that the X5105 is a little bigger, thicker. Every dimension's a little bit bigger on this radio. And it's a little heavier. The KX2 is just smaller, lighter weight, more compact. You know, so keep that in mind. If you're looking for something that's lighter weight, that's going to be the KX2. The receive current numbers on this are much better than the X5105. The KX2 in receive only draws about 120 milliamps in my measurements, which is excellent. If you turn off the backlighting and all that stuff, you can save quite a lot of power with it. The X5105 is really between about 300 to 600 milliamps, depending on if it's charging the internal battery or not at the same time. When it's operating just like this, then it's probably drawing about 300 milliamps, but you can't really test that because it's internal. It's an internal battery it's pulling from without opening it up and connecting up, you know, multimeter or something to it. But what you're able to do, I've put an inline volt and amp meter on this when it's charging, and when it's charging it's about 600 milliamps, and then once it's charged the internal battery all the way, it'll drop down to about 300 milliamps. That's a lot. Now, the compensation for it is the internal battery is very robust in this. I have done, I think, 5 activations off of one battery charge, but keeping in mind I was only operating 5 watts the whole time. I think the KX2 would easily do that as well. It'd have the same, if not longer, playtime off of that. But the battery is not internally charged. You can't internally charge it here on the KX2 yet. Now, I do think, based on a message I saw on the Elecraft reflector, that they are considering a module that you could put in that would allow for internal battery charging on the KX2, and that would be wonderful if they did that. I think I'd really like that. Though I'm used to pulling the battery out on this and charging it up. It's not a big deal. The KX2 just has a better receiver. Okay. I don't know if I can actually test this here now or not. I've actually got an antenna plugged in, and let's see if I can maybe find a sample signal here. Conditions are kind of weird today. Boy, listen to that. It's absolutely quiet. Absolutely quiet here on the bands. Okay, let me turn it up. One thing that is an issue with the X5105 is if you turn up the volume... Whoops, nope. I don't want to do that. Come on, stop. There we go. Sorry about that. Gosh. I'm a terrible ham. See, I have this set up for voice memory keying, and the PTT button will enact the voice memory keyer, and I was using this only, was it this week, for a Parks on the Air activation. Oh, goodness. This is what happens when you do videos in your K4SWL. So I don't know how well this is, I'm going to be able to compare this, but just listen to the noise floor here on the, see if you turn it up, you hear that splatter? It has a splatter sound when you start to turn it up. You really can't turn it up more than about 2/3 of the way. Now the volume is fine for a field operation, but it is, it will splatter when you turn it up quite a bit. I find, especially when you're operating single sideband or listening to AM, that the receivers has a higher noise floor, and the audio is harsher than it is on the KX2. If I hop over here to the KX2, let's move down to the okay, let's see where we are here. I like, you can just tell that it has better filtering, it has better audio. It's just a more refined receiver experience. I can tell you now that based on my usage, I would never take the X5105 out on field day. In fact, the last time I was using it, it was at the W4 Summits on the Air campout, and there were other people in the campground that were using their radios. One guy was somewhere on the campground operating CW, and it was really having an effect on this radio. No matter where I was on the band, it was kind of bleeding through. The front end of this radio is just not as bulletproof as it is with the KX2. KX2 you could operate on field day and in RF dense environments, and it'll hold up to it. X5105 kind of falls apart in those situations. But with that said, and I think the filtering is just much better on the KX2, the variable filter and everything. This one feels more like an audio filter than anything. It's got the KX2 has better sensitivity and a lower noise floor. And that's really kind of what you're paying for there with the extra money that you're paying for an Elecraft product, I believe. What else here? So another thing, both of these radios have CW message memory keying, which is really handy, because you can program a message and send CQ or whatever you want to by the press of a button. Now, the X5105 has, I think, up to 10 positions that you can put messages in, whereas the KX2, I think, is only 3, maybe 4, but I think it's only 3. I only use 2 or 3, so I never really do any more than that. But practically speaking, you can only really use one with the X5105 in the field unless you're willing to really finagle a lot of menus and move around in the menus and everything. It's just, I never do that. It's not worth it to me. It kind of defeats the purpose. So I only use one message memory slot, and that's usually for CQ. And you heard that just now when I accidentally pressed the PTT instead of the volume up button. Also, I find it's easy to defeat the CW memory or voice memory keying when you press any button on the KX2. This one you have to press certain buttons like the PTT again. You heard when I was trying to turn it off, it wouldn't even turn off during that. That's one of the other kind of annoyances with it. A minor thing, but it's there. Now, the KX2 will actually do voice memory keying as well. So you can set up, when you're in single sideband, you can set up 3 different positions with recorded voice audio. I think it's 3 positions. Don't quote me on that. You may need to look it up. I only use 2 usually. In fact, it's usually just for calling CW when it's in voice. I never really use voice for saying 7 3s, thank you. I do that in CW, however. to save a little time. The X5105 has no voice memory keying at all. So just keep that in mind. The KX2 has better ergonomics than the X5105, in my opinion. There are some good things about the X5105. I really like the tuning knob doesn't bother me at all. This kind of front, almost nearly recessed tuning knob. It's fine for me. I don't mind that a bit. I kind of like it because I don't worry about it getting hurt like I would on the KX2. KX2 you can buy side panels, third-party side panels to protect it. But the X5105, I'm not too worried about this being damaged or anything. But the ergonomics are bad in that it's very menu driven. You have to click on these menus and go through here. It's a pain actually when you're operating if you have to adjust anything. The main thing I ever adjust with the X5105 is if someone needs me to slow down. And so I want a QRS. Well, it's usually in this menu 5 for doing the voice or the CW memory keying. And so I have to like find the right spot to go in here to turn down the speed. In fact, I've got to go through here and figure out where that is. It may be in one of the other menu. I think I have to go through, I think I counted one time, it's like 12 or 13 button presses to go from that. So it's just not practical. If someone needs me to slow down and I'm on the X5105, what I do is I space out my characters so that it's being sent at 17 or 18 words a minute, but the spacing may be something closer to 10 words a minute. And that's all I can do. Whereas on the KX2, it's really simple. I can just turn the volume or turn this knob right here and it always has keyer speed right there. So QRSing is very easy. The KX2 is designed by field operators. Wayne especially, I'm sure Eric is too. They're both QRPers and field operators. And they have a gigantic beta testing group that goes through these radios. So it's thought through from the perspective of a radio amateur. You can tell that the X5105 is not as much so. I'm sure that whoever the developer is a amateur radio operator, but they don't have a beta. I can guarantee you they don't have the beta testers like Elecraft does. In fact, these two companies sort of have different philosophies. Elecraft, when they put a product out and it's actually on the market for you to purchase in production, you can bet it's going to be pretty polished by then. It doesn't mean that they won't have some firmware updates to fix some bugs, but it's going to be very minor things usually. The Xiegu, they focus on getting something from prototyping into production as quickly as possible, and really, at the end of the day, early adopters tend to be their beta testers. This radio, when it came out, had really bad issues with CW keying, so it took, I think, almost a year for the firmware to be upgraded to the point that that was no longer an issue. Now it's pretty good, but that's something to keep in mind. I wouldn't, as a normal ham who's not in a rush, when a new Xiegu product comes out, I would wait for all the early adopters and early reviewers, people like me, to test this first before you buy it. Sometimes I feel like I'm taking a bullet for somebody else when I do this, because we'll discover all the things that are issues. And for example, Xiegu produced the GSOC, the GSOC, which is a controller for the G90 and this radio, supposedly. They produced that last year. Looked really cool, and it was a great concept. But I know that they had no beta testers that were CW operators, because you couldn't operate CW on it. There was a real timing issue. There was a latency of probably 200 or 300 milliseconds from keying on that, and so CW just wasn't really a possibility. You just can't key when you've got that much of a delay between your brain, the side tone that you're hearing, and when it's actually sending it. Xiegu's, they have a completely different approach. They just get it out to market as quickly as possible. Then they start to fix the firmware later. Whereas Elecraft, usually the firmware is pretty darn polished by the time it comes out. And it's just so well thought through. That's not to say that, the Xiegu doesn't have some great innovative features and some cool design in a lot of respects, but Elecraft's just better at that. They're just a little bit better. Also, with if you're a CW operator, one of the great things about the KX2, excuse me, you can attach a paddle to the front of the radio, which is really, really convenient. Can't do that with the X5105. Now, some people don't care for attached paddles, but I like it when I'm operating on a clipboard, for example, when I don't have a lot of space. This comes in quite handy to be able to have your key here. It stays mounted, it's really secure. And here's the way it sounds when you operate CW. Okay, the ATU. Let me just make a match here real quick. Even though I'm not really operating a lot, I don't know what the SWR is. You can hear how it sounds. It's full break-in QSK. It sounds great. So that's 7024.4. Okay. Sorry, I should identify myself if I do that. I'll turn this off. Actually, I need to turn it back on to remember that frequency already. Excuse me. Let's see. Let's try this with the Xiegu 24. I'm not too crazy about how this works either, but I don't do a lot of tuning in the field. Okay. Now let's see how the ATU handles this. See, ATU is very quick in this. That is a very big positive with this. It's probably a little faster than the KX2s even, but the KX2 probably is a little wider range. I don't know. They're very similar. This has an excellent ATU in it. You can hear it click. You can hear the relay clicking. This is, I think, at 100 milliseconds or something. But you can hear the click. Sometimes it sounds a little clunky even when you're doing the CW keying. So if you're a CW operator and you want some silky smooth QSK, the X5105 is not that. Now, I don't think the relays sound too bad in this actually, and it doesn't bother me at all, really, not me. But keep that in mind. That this has relays. This has the KX2 has pin diode switching, so it's very, very quiet. Turn this off here. Well, I don't need to turn it off actually. Another thing that I think is just I feel like I should add is that, you know, when you're buying these, they're both good radios. I got the X5105, and honestly, when I first got it, I mainly reviewed it because I was asked to do it. Excuse me. Some of my readers and viewers said, hey, you need to try out the X5105. It didn't interest me. It really had no interest in me at all because I already have the KX2, and I thought I don't really need an X5105. And I kind of thought of it being kind of, you know, a cheaper version of that. When it arrived, first of all, I was really impressed with its size. It was smaller than I expected it to be. When I took it to the field, I actually enjoyed operating it. And I was incredibly impressed with how long the battery lasts. Even though the received current is more than the KX2, Xiegu kind of compensated for it by putting a really large rechargeable lithium-ion battery inside. And so I was very impressed with that as well. And it's pretty darn rugged. And the thing is, Xiegu, I think both of these radios are quality products. This is a quality $550 to $600 radio. I think for that, you're getting good quality. I think that you're getting excellent quality for a $1,200 to $1,300 radio configured as this one is. So you really can't go wrong. But I would say that Elecraft tends to have better engineering, and their products tend to be much higher quality on the receiver side of things, on performance, on ergonomics. Everything's just a little better than the X5105. And but even with that, I still bought the X5105 after the review. Why? It's kind of nice to have one of these kicking around. I can keep this in the car at all times, and when it's charged up, I can go out and play radio. It's a very forgiving radio, much like the KX2. I can put almost any kind of antenna on it, and it'll tune it. if I just want that match, it'll do that. It's very easy to operate. And it's kind of all self-contained. And so it's great for soda. It's great for pretty much anything you want to do. But if I have a choice between the two of them, there's no question. I think the KX2 is very much worth the price. And I know the price has been going up a little bit lately because of supply chain and parts availability and costs and everything. And keep in mind, the Elecraft KX2 is designed and manufactured here in the United States. So they're paying U.S. production costs on this. Whereas the X5105 is designed and produced in China. So there's actually a little bit of a wait time right now on the KX2 as well. Yeah, at least at time of making this video. But I think the KX2 is worth it. It's one of my favorite radios I've ever owned. It's probably my favorite radio, actually. I have used this more than I've used any other radio I've ever owned, and love it. The X5105 is great fun. I would say, if you're trying to make a purchase decision, without rambling on too long here, if really your budget's more of the X5105 and you just want a field radio to complement, whatever you're doing, your shack radio and that sort of thing, and you want to give field radio a try, definitely go for the X5105. You can't go wrong with it. Yes, the performance isn't as good, the audio is not as good, it's just less refined than the KX2. But it gets the job done. Most of the time you're in the field, you're not out there under RF dense circumstances. The audio's fine for that. It works like 98-99% of the time. I just wouldn't operate it on a day like field day or during a contest. It doesn't mean you couldn't use it. It's just that your ears are going to be ringing after that because the receiver's struggling with that much RF density out there. The KX2 is just much more of a pleasure to operate. So if you're new and you want an affordable radio to take to the field, definitely consider the X5105. If the money is not as much of an issue, even if it's a little bit of a stretch to go with the KX2, just go straight to the KX2. I promise you, you will not regret it. It is an incredible radio. So these are both great choices. So I see why people struggle making this choice. And I mean, you can tell how long this video is. It's even hard for me to kind of describe the differences between the two of them because they're both good in their own rights. But if given the choice, I'm always going to go for the KX2 each and every time. But the X5105 is awfully fun. And I tell you what, I ate crow when I ended up buying this after the review. I never would have guessed I'd do that, but I kind of like the thing. It's got some appeal. Reminds me in a way of the Index Labs QRP Plus that I owned at one point. Not a very refined radio, not a fantastic receiver, but it was a lot of fun to operate and it worked really well. And that is my experience here with the X5105. So if I've missed something, please include it in the, make a note in the comments below. Share your kind comments. I'd love to hear it. Again, if you're not into these long format rambly videos like this, that's perfectly fine. Just go elsewhere. I'm not doing this. I don't do this channel to make a bunch of money off of ads. There are no ads on my channel. I've turned off monetization. So, you can choose to go elsewhere if you want to, but, I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear from people who've used the KX2, who've used the X5105, and maybe someone who decides that there's another Shack-in-the-Box radio that they enjoy using, like the MCHF, or there's some other radios out there that do this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Anyway, until next time, 7-3s. If you like what you see here and you feel like subscribing, feel free to do so. You can hit the little alert button if you want to know whenever I produce a new video. These are not my typical videos. Normally, I'm doing field activation videos. But if you also would like me to compare other radios, let me know, and I'll try to do a video like this one where I just kind of talk in a pretty unscripted way about features and compare the two side by side. Anyway, thank you very much, and until next time, 7-3s.